My name is Odessa Mackenzie Shannon.
My name is Warren Gordon Crutchfield.
I am Ruby Reese Moon.
My name is James C. Offord.
My name is Christine Clark.
My name is William Harvey Ziegler, better known as Harvey Ziegler.
Each of these individuals was born during segregated times, and each had a hand in improving race relations here in Montgomery County, Maryland. Today, these witnesses to history help explore the 2015 theme for Black History Month, a century of Black life, history, and culture in Montgomery County, Maryland. 100 years ago, African Americans in Montgomery County lived completely separate from whites. When the state abolished slavery in 1864, families banded together, struggled and saved, and managed to build self-sustaining communities. Warren Crutchfield's great-great-grandmother was a slave to the Bell Sisters of Rockville. Once freed, she and her husband were able to buy some land from her former owners.
My grandmother, Flora Powell, Alfred Ross, the Johnsons and the Woods and all those people who worked for the sisters start purchasing land. And from then it grew. And from then it grew. They bought a little piece, then they bought more, and then they bought more, and they bought more. It's amazing to me that down through the years that we're still here, that from that originally slave family.
Today, that land surrounds Martin's Lane. Crutchfield and many members of his extended family still live there. For decades, it was a place they could live, worship, educate their children, and most importantly, feel protected.
I lived in a cocoon, so I didn't know about discrimination and segregation because it was really a self-contained community.
While Odessa Shannon grew up in Anacostia, her experiences mimic those from Montgomery County.
It was a Black community where people looked after each other. The school and the church were the center of everything. If you did something at the bottom of the hill, your mother knew it before you got to the top.
Tina Clark calls Poolesville home, where her great-grandfather, a freed slave, had set down roots.
You didn't encounter racism until you went outside of Poolesville. I mean, we were aware that things were different, but what other frame of reference did you have? Now, once you got down to Rockville, then that was a whole different ballgame. That is when I met a little girl named Linda, and Linda taught me how to roller skate, because in Poolesville, we didn't roller skate. Where were we gonna roller skate? On the dirt? And so Linda taught me how to roller skate. And so sometimes I'd go down to Rockville and I'd stay for a while, or Papa would drop me off on the way to teach music and pick me up on the way back. And so one day I met Linda and she was crying. And I asked her, what's the matter? She says, I can't play with you anymore. And I said, why? Did I do something? Did I hurt your feeling? Did I offend you? She said, no, you're colored.
James Offord grew up in Sandy Spring. Even though it was Quaker territory, he had to know his place.
It was very disappointing that when a white person told you or said, you can't come in, or if you want to buy something, you can come to the door, come to the end of the counter, and order whatever you want. Then you had to go out and go round back, and then they would stick our food out of the window, out of a back window, from that inside. You see, so that was humiliating. You see, but we had no choice.
Harvey Ziegler's grandfather fled slavery through the Underground Railroad. He left Charleston, South Carolina, and settled near Damascus, in what became known as Zieglertown.
If you didn't look out for yourselves, well, by being an ethnic group, you wouldn't get anything done. So we had to bind together, teamwork and harmony and faith. That's the only thing that kept us going, because it was segregated. So
Ruby Reese Moon came to the D.C. area in the early 60s. She grew up in the South, rural Sparta, Georgia. The daughter of sharecroppers, she and her siblings were required to work on the plantation.
We didn't get to go to school an awful lot because we had to chop the cotton, and then when it grew up, then we had to pick the cotton. So most time we would start to school about November, of every year, and then about the last of March, 1st of April, we were out chopping cotton.
Nonetheless, Moon graduated high school, attended college, and became a counselor. Eventually, she earned her master's degree. She and everyone else in this program were taught one primary lesson by their parents.
You going to school, you know, you may not be a teacher, you may not be an engineer, but you're going to get some sort of skills that will carry you on in life, because once you have that degree, nobody can take it away from you. So it's very important that you get the education. So during that time, education was the primary concern of the Afro community.
But just getting a high school diploma presented obstacles.
Well, there was only one black high school in Montgomery County, and that was in the Lincoln Park area of Rockville. And in order to get to high school, we had to be bused, and we had to pay. They gave us old worn-out, broken-down buses that the whites had thrown away. And they said, here are buses for you, now you get your own drivers. And the thing about it was, we were all, Sandy Spring, were in walking distance of Sherwood. I had a cousin who the only thing separated him from Sherwood was a fence. He could have gotten to Sherwood in 2 minutes. And he had to pay to ride 10 miles to Rockville to Lincoln High School.
In 1954, after the Supreme Court decision on Brown versus Board of Education, Montgomery County began taking steps to desegregate its public schools. It was a process that took 7 years. Tina Clark's grandfather was instrumental in making that transition. The only way to make things better was to organize, and many people took up the cause. There were marches for fair housing, campaigns for public accommodations, and segregated establishments were boycotted or picketed. In 1960, the amusement park at Glen Echo was targeted. For an entire year, blacks, alongside many of the park's white neighbors, demonstrated out front. Tina Clark was one of them.
Picketing on weekends, taking buses, cars. You had the students from Howard University. They joined us. You had the folks from Montgomery County. We were all there picketing. Every opportunity, every chance we got, we were down there. And then finally, they said, okay. The reason that I don't go to the art gallery, it's in that tower where they would crowd all us black folks there when we were under arrest. They just put us all in there. People were fainting, passing out everywhere.
In 1963, Ruby Reese Moon and her husband James, both active in civil rights in the South, were inspired to move north. This coincided with the time they were recruiting people to travel to D.C. for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s now historic speech.
When Dr. King gave that speech, oh, that was it. We just knew everything was going to be all right for us. It had so much meaning. It had so much meaning because you felt that things were getting better. You felt, here we had moved up here, we had gotten jobs, and we participated in this march, and you just saw things getting better for us. And I really felt elated.
Changing the law was one thing, changing people's hearts and minds was another.
When the civil rights came, it was a monumental decision, you know. And although it was on record in the early stages, it was still segregation.
Warren Crutchfield spent over 30 years as a physical education teacher and coach here in Montgomery County. In the early 60s, he was the first African American to coach an integrated team.
You go to a game. I went to a school, and I've always had white assistants, and they went in, and I got to go in and said, excuse me, sir, where are you going? I said, I'm going in to the game. I said, I'm the coach. They said, no, you're not the coach. The coach just went in. And that's right. I said, no, that's my assistant. And things like that you went through the early part of the 60s.
Harvey Ziegler was hired by the Atomic Energy Commission in Germantown, but he noticed something wrong there.
And they didn't have no colored African Americans in none of the shops, electric shop, carpenter shop, plumbing shop, communication, elevator mechanic, no black. So I say, hey, what's going on? So I just made a complaint with the EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity, and then I saw everything caved in on me. I got shipped out, but eventually, by talking to people downtown about how they treated me and what went wrong, so I had the director of labor to come and talk to me, and eventually they said, well, that was wrong, we're going to correct it. So they sent me back to Germantown with an assistant chief. So by me speaking up, not only did I get promoted, a lot of other employees got promoted.
In 1966, as her oldest child was close to finishing elementary school, Odessa Shannon decided to look for a house in Montgomery County, where she had heard the schools were top-notch.
And we went to a house in Chevy Chase that looked very appealing. And as we walked up the driveway to the house, we saw the salesman climb out the back kitchen window so that he wouldn't have to talk to us. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, is this the way this county is? You know, it had a reputation for being liberal and what have you, but to climb out the kitchen window so that he wouldn't have to talk to us. So I told my husband, I'm not going to put my children through anything like that. So if we're going to move out here, which we wanted to do, I want to find a place where my children will be comfortable. They might have to face things in school, but when they come home, I want them to be happy.
The Shannon family did move to Montgomery County. They settled in Colesville, where some other black families were moving in. Her son entered White Oak Junior High and came home one day with this question.
My history teacher put up this big Confederate flag and said, "The South shall rise again." What did he mean? Well, that was my first trip to the Board of Education.
There were other trips to the Board of Ed, and eventually Odessa Shannon was elected to that organization, making her the first black woman to take public office in Montgomery County. Her resume expanded over time, but her goal remained the same: to make things better for others and especially the next generation. So too for everyone being recognized today. Each in his or her own way spoke up, pointed out injustices, and fought for equality.
I have lived to see the changes, and I had a little bit to do with it. And so it makes me feel good.
But it's a lot to be done yet still.
I'm happy for what I have done, but on the other hand, I don't feel that I've done enough.
Sometimes I see us moving backwards. I just don't know where we are now. When I hear African American students say, "It's not cool to be smart," I'm devastated.
We felt that sting back then when we couldn't do it, and I think that's what's missing with this generation.
Young black people have no idea what people went through, whose shoulders they're standing on, and we want to make sure they know that, so that they can carry on the fight, because it's not over.